ended quickly because I don't think anybody wants to relive much of what we just witnessed with the Patriots. This is 33-6. This was one of the biggest slogs. If you're a Patriots fan or someone who follows the team that you can remember. And again, people are going to be looking back, trying to figure out if they can locate another game that was as bad start to finish in every facet of the game as this one was for the Patriots. So there's a million things that happened that were awful on Sunday, Evan, in this 33-6 home loss, the worst in the Belichick era. But the story is going to entirely revolve around Cam Newton. So let's start there. This was a miserable performance from Cam, save for maybe a couple of throws on one drive that also ended poorly. But why don't you get into what you saw out of Newton in this game?
Look, it's going to continue to be an unpopular take, and I'm going to keep on dishing it because it's the cold, hard truth here. For the 4 straight games, the quarterback play has been the worst part about this team. It's really that simple. Against the Raiders, Cam Newton was not good. Against Kansas City, we obviously know that Hoyer and Stidham weren't good. And the last 2 games since Cam returned from the coronavirus, not good and not good. The Patriots, quite frankly, are just not getting good enough quarterback play this season right now to be a competitive football team against good teams. It's that simple. You know, their defense has holes personnel-wise that we can get into. This was a bad matchup for them defensively, and it exposed a lot of things that they have issues on defense. Offensively, there's open receivers, there's protection, there's clean pockets, there's all things going on that we can see that, okay, listen, you might not know who the receivers are, you might not know who they're throwing to at tight end, you might not have ever heard of Demir Bird in your life, but I'm telling you right now that we can all watch it from the press box. We can watch it on TV and see open receivers and ability to move the football in different ways through the air that are not being done because Cam is not playing well. And I'm sorry. I know it hurts to hear as a Patriots fan. I know it hurts to hear as a Cam fan, but that's just the cold, hard truth.
Yeah. And Evan, again, it's hard. It's harder to see on TV. So you're there and you're seeing it, and you're seeing the open receivers, and obviously you can't see it from the television game angle. So there's a lot of people at home right now wondering, and this was the debate had last week as well. Is it the receivers? Do we need weapons? And everybody quickly piled on that, and then most people like yourself who went and looked at the film after and said, well, weapons aren't great. But there were open receivers. Cam just didn't see them, or he got to that progression a little bit late, or they flashed open and he just hesitated, or he held the ball too long, or never looked to that side of the field. And there was a few instances last week. It felt like today there were a ton of those instances on a lot of plays where he was just holding the ball, or just getting rid of it to the right receiver, but too late.
Right. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is this misconception that there aren't open receivers really comes from, and it's no fault of it, the viewer, it comes from the broadcast angle, right? We're not really getting a great look when you watch a game on TV of who is open downfield, because the receivers, after they run 8 yards, are off the screen. So how could you possibly evaluate? So when you look at that and you see Cam just ball in the pocket, patting the ball in the pocket, is that there's nobody open, that he's looking around and there's nobody open. Well, that's not always the case. So I think what we saw here today are 2 plays that really exemplified to me the issues, the microcosm of these issues right now. The first one was actually a completion by Cam Newton. He completed a pass to Jacoby Myers on what's called a flood concept. So you flood the left side of the field with a flat route, a go route, and then a corner route into that window. And Jacoby Myers is open for about, I would say, a beat to a beat and a half before Cam Newton actually throws the ball to him. And by the time he throws the ball to him, the safety is already on top of him because he sees him open, and they're crashing down right on Jacoby Myers. Now, the ball is complete. They moved the sticks on the play, I believe. But the problem is that if the ball comes out earlier and on time, well, now you give Jacoby Myers some space to run with the football after the catch and make a play and make that safety miss potentially and gain more yards after contact. So that's what's not happening. The other one was the interception of Julian Edelman. That's such a perfect example of how chemistry and receiver and quarterback just aren't matching up right now. Edelman ran his patented option route. He's got a 3-way go. He can go left, he can go right, or he can sit down against zone coverage. His initial instinct was to sit down. Then he realized that the coverage had collapsed on him because the ball didn't come out quickly enough. So he cut inside to kind of get away from the defender, and Cam threw it to the old spot, and it goes off Edelman's hands right up in the air and is intercepted. So that's chemistry right there. there that's not getting the ball out on time and not being able to anticipate those passing windows on the throw to Jacoby Myers. And that's the issue that we are seeing right now with Cam. I see the comments. I know I'm going to get them on Twitter. We have no receivers. We have no receivers. They could have Randy Moss and Wes Welker and Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski in his prime and Julian Edelman in his prime out there right now. If Cam continues to play the way that he's playing, it's going to look ugly.
Well, yeah, and speaking of which, anybody mentioning Rob Gronkowski and other players in their prime,
yeah.
don't go look at the Tampa score if you're feeling a little bit uneasy about yourself right now, because Brady put on a clinic and arguably his best game as a Buck this year, and Rob Gronkowski starting to look like Rob Gronkowski again. So nobody wants to hear that, but again, people do just want to know what's going on. You mentioned those two situations. There were others as well. Harry, when he was still in the game, one time was open over the middle of the field. Newton didn't see him. Then on third down, he delivers it late in the flat, which, in short of the sticks. The pass that he throws to N'Keal Harry and gets him killed, that ball's not going to go anywhere on third down. You're just, there's nothing.
The worst part about that one too, John, is that it was the wrong throw.
Yeah.
So N'Keal Harry they're running double angle routes, right? So they have one angle route that's a little bit shorter and then one angle route that's a little bit longer. And the low hole player came and cut off N'Keal Harry. And if he had just waited a beat for the second angle route, the longer route to kind of develop, then he wouldn't have had help to the middle of the field and he probably had a completion there. Right. I'm going to go back and watch that one in a few minutes because I really felt like watching it live that was the wrong decision there. And that's what got N'Keal Harry knocked out of the game because the low hole player came and blew him up right when he caught the football. So just decision making, anticipation, ball placement. I mean, everything that you look for in quarterback play, Cam did it poorly today. And it's just the truth.
And the one that everyone's going to remember was the 10-yard out that he bounced 5 feet short. Was it a bird?
Yes.
I mean, that's, again, could be slipped out of his hand. Who knows? That's as ugly a throw as we've seen any quarterback make in New England in 20-something years. I'm going back to the days of Seacules and Hodson to see something that grotesque.
He had a bad one to Edelman too last week towards the end of the game. I think it was the final drive of the game. Maybe even the ball just went right into the ground. He had that hand issue or arm issue that he was kind of flexing last game.
Right, and again, everyone was looking at that. Nobody knows if there's an injury there.
Maybe that is extending into this game. But look, I think more so than like the Errant throw that you pointed out to Bird, it's about process, right? Is he going through it? Is he going through the process correctly? Because I can live with bad throws. Bad throws are going to happen. Tom Brady has bad throws every once in a while too, or the ball just comes out of his hand weird, or he just sails it. Jimmy Garoppolo sailed one over George Kittle's head, wide open receiver in the middle of the field on Devin McCourty.
A little bit of pressure, but he had
had him wide open and he sails it over his head. It happens, right? But the problem is the process clean? Right? Is the process, the mental processing, the feet, are they lining up with the timing of his drops and the timing of the route and the timing of the play call, all those types of things. And we're just not seeing good quarterback play right now.
And you did mention it at one point on Twitter that you thought last week you mentioned Cam's mechanics had regressed a little bit. And we said maybe practice had something to do with that and he needs his reps. And there was a point on Twitter you did mention that you felt that mechanically, he looked a little bit more sound, which again is all the more worrisome because most of it is here now. He's not getting it, or it's just not working for him right now, and that's worrisome here because he's not seeing the field, the right way.
100%. I would like to go back and watch some of the throws first before I comment on his mechanics completely. But from what I saw in that one drive, even the throw to Myers that I pointed out earlier, his mechanics were actually pretty solid. He missed the initial kind of timing of the play, but he was able to elude the rush and still throw from a decent base to get the ball there to Myers before the safety closed on him. So his footwork was better. He wasn't throwing with parallel feet to the line of scrimmage. He was moving off his spots a little bit more this game than last game. He was able to step into some of his throws a little bit more this game than last game. But I think the biggest thing that we are seeing is that this is a timing precision offense. And I just don't know, quite frankly, if Cam Newton has the mental processing speed to run in a system like that. He's a see it, throw it quarterback. He's somebody that needs to see a guy open, and then he's going to use his hose to just fit it into whatever window it's going to be fit into. But that's not the Patriots offense.
But let me ask you that, because this is the question is, a strength of Belichick over the years has always been adapt to your personnel. Okay.
Right.
At this point, the most important person on the field is the quarterback, in the sense that you mentioned this team's not going anywhere if it doesn't get improved quarterback play. It doesn't matter. For every other flaw you can nitpick, issues with the linebackers, sometimes the front seven can get exploited a little bit.
Right.
The weapons aren't great, but there's a lot of things you can point to, but you're going nowhere without this. So at what point do you say we have to build a new offensive strategy if you're going to have Cam Newton as your quarterback there? Unless, of course, you think Stidham is the person who can play in that precision offense, in which case you got to start getting him reps and getting him in the game and see if you can salvage the season. We'll get to Stidham in a minute, but I mean, ultimately, is it up to the Patriots to maybe adapt a little bit here? Cam's not going to be that, take the quick drop and get the ball out in 2.4 seconds. It's just not going to happen.
Right. I would love to see them be able to do some things like that to make this offense a little bit more Cam friendly. And I think they have done things in the past. What we saw, we always go back to that week 2 in Seattle because that's when it looked the best, right? And they're getting a little bit more vertical up the field. They're running more vertical concepts, 3-go routes, things like that with conversions, obviously. Things that are a little bit more Cam-like, where he's kind of just watching the field, deep part of the field, waiting for somebody to come open and then slinging it, right? Now what we're seeing, though, I think more in the last couple of weeks is, what Josh McDaniels talked about during training camp, that this is Cam Newton adapting to the Patriots offense with stylistic changes to fit Cam. The read option plays, some of the running game things that they've done, some of the spacing things that they've done with empty formations and things like that. But they can't fully throw out the foundation of the system and start completely from scratch, especially in season at this point, or with a shortened training camp like they had this summer. So changing the entire scheme is out of the question. It's out of the question. So that really kind of suggests that maybe they need to change the quarterback. I don't know if I'm there yet. I think that you kind of give Cam one more week to see if maybe this truly was COVID just completely throwing him off the rails here, and that time off that he missed really screwed him over. But right now, when I watch Jarrett Stidham play, it's still not pretty. There's still issues, right? Throwing it inside shoulder instead of outside shoulder to Julian Edelman. But at least when he hits his back foot, most of the time, a decision is probably made, right? And he had that one throw to Jacoby Myers that I pointed out on Twitter, where he got to the top of his drop. He saw the seam route cleared out the coverage. He saw Myers sit down on that stick route. Ball was out. Ball was on Myers. That's Brady, right? That's the Patriots offense, and we just haven't seen that enough from Cam.
Yeah. So this conversation is going to go on all week long, and it's going to continue to go on until you see Cam Newton have a better game. I don't know if we're going to know what the Patriots are thinking as far as this is concerned. Even if Bill is thinking of going Stidham, I don't think you're going to see it. You're not going to hear it, and you're not going to know about it until we get deep into the week or you get to next Sunday. So we'll see, but it's going to be a conversation we're going to keep having. Stidham in very short action today. Again, that horrible throw on the interception where he throws to the wrong shoulder. Did you see anything else you liked here?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing with Stidham is that this offense, schematically, both from what they do the best from a coaching standpoint and then also just from a personnel standpoint, might need to be a 21 personnel under center attack, like what we saw with Tom Brady a little bit more in 2018 and 2019, where they get under center with Jakob Johnson, the fullback, as the lead blocker in the backfield. And on first and second down, it's going to be a whole lot of 3 yards in a cloud of dust sometimes, but they'll crank out bigger runs. They can clearly run the football. And then it's hard under center play action off of that to try to get some separation for the receivers and some easier throwing windows. Those little pop passes that you see from the quarterback where the tight end goes right up the seam or crosses over the face of the safety. And it's just hit the back foot, make the play action fake, pop up, throw the football right to an open receiver. Cam is not really that type of quarterback. He's never been an under center quarterback. He's never been a big play action quarterback. So it's not really a stylistic thing with Cam. I think we'll see they put Cam under center is that he struggles to make those reads off of play action with his back to the defense. Then he picks back up and he's got to read the defense in 2 seconds with his back turned, initially. Now he's got to make a quick decision off of that, and those plays need to hit quickly. And they're just not hitting quick enough right now. The way they run their offense is not smooth right now because the quarterback is not making the right decisions with the football. And it's demoralizing, I think, for everybody because the receivers are making plays, the offensive line is making plays at time, and then there's open receivers, there's a clean pocket, and then the ball is just not going where the ball is supposed to go.
All right, so I'm going to ask this about open receivers, and I don't want every single conversation we have about receivers to be a referendum on N'Keal Harry. Harry was knocked out of the game. We didn't see what kind of game he might have had, so it's unfair to judge versus his replacement. But Jakobi Meyers comes in and immediately is more open than it seems that we've seen Harry at any point this year. He had 2 20-yard gains, and Harry has 0. So what are we missing here? I mean, again, it's I don't mean to make it just a comparison, but Meyers is playing at this point only because Harry is out, and immediately he comes in and he starts making plays. And granted, he didn't light up the stat sheet, but really nobody did because the quarterbacks didn't give him much of an opportunity. But he looked like a reasonably useful receiver and weapon. I mean, we would have been, if we got that performance out of Harry, we'd be fawning all over him right now.
I think the bigger sort of conversation here that needs to be had is not Jakobi Meyers versus N'Keal Harry. It's actually Jakobi Meyers versus Julian Edelman. Right. Jakobi Meyers is more of a slot guy, probably going to play inside most of the time in that Edelman role. He is, today showed that from a route running technique perspective, he's a very good receiver in that respect. Now he's very slow, and I don't think that it was his fault at all. The deep interception where he stumbled and fell down and Cam kind of threw it deep to him and he wasn't there. I don't think that was Myers' fault necessarily, but if that's any receiver that can run a little bit and he stays up on his feet, that's a one-on-one matchup down the field with a chance to make a play. And Myers just isn't that guy. So he's a very good route runner. He's good at the top of the route. He's a little bit slow off the line of scrimmage and doesn't have that kind of speed that you would really look for. But he's a clean possession receiver. He's a guy that can get open at the sticks, create some separation at the top of the route, and he sort of knows how to work off of guys. He's got, if you could combine N'Keal Harry and Jakobi Meyers, you'd have a really darn good receiver, right? He's got all the little things and all the technique things that the Patriots want to see out of N'Keal Harry exists with Jakobi Meyers. He's just not a good athlete.
Yeah. Moving on, the other issues with that we saw today, and again, I know you were talking about it on Twitter. They got gashed on the ground, but you expected that, and that's something that happens. But you were also concerned with the pass defense today.
I'm more concerned with the pass defense because that's supposed to be the dominant phase of this defense. Let's put it that way. If the Patriots gave up what they gave up on the ground, but they held Jimmy Garoppolo to 6.5 yards per attempt, then they wouldn't have given up 33 points and lost this game 33-6. I guarantee it. And some of the things that we saw out of San Francisco today that exploited the Patriots defense were things that the Patriots defense coming into this game should have known about. Throws behind the line of scrimmage, motion, jet motion, orbits, little hit dump offs behind the line to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. These were not downfield throws. Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe he attempted one pass, if that, over 20 yards in this game, right? It's all within 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. It's all about misdirection and getting the ball into good playmakers, good ball carriers, creators in space. And that's exactly what happened over and over again. And that's their offense. So the Patriots watched that offense on tape all week long, and the Niners didn't do anything different. They didn't throw anything special at them. They did exactly what they always do, and they got beat. And I think the biggest thing that you see is that as good as this Patriots defense is built to stop a team like Kansas City, the issue with getting smaller, getting lighter, getting faster, putting DBs on the field, running things out of dime and nickel and sometimes even dollar, which is 7 defensive backs on the field at once. The issue there is that these teams like San Francisco, like Baltimore, that are heavy personnel teams, run first teams on first down, are a bad matchup. That is what it is. I tweeted about it all week. San Francisco's offense versus the Patriots defense was a bad matchup for New England. They don't have the size, they don't have the power up front or the defensive line play to hold up against an offense like the Niners. And today we just saw that come to fruition.
Any leftover thoughts here, Evan, on the rest of the game? And again, it's rare for the Patriots to have two burn the tape games in a row. But this is clearly not just for how ugly it was, the most concerning game, because you chalked up the Denver one to COVID, knocking them out of their routine, and not having any practice time. And a lot of what happened last week makes sense. Almost nothing of what happened this week makes sense outside of just poor play. You had your offensive line as healthy as it's been. You had, again, your receivers as healthy as they are. You had your full complement of mostly everything here, and this happened. So what now?
I don't know. And, I see a lot of questions sort of in this running chat here about.
And that's the thing. I'm sorry to interrupt quickly. The toughest thing for a lot of Patriots fans to be able to wrap their minds around here is going to be that there might not be a fix. This might be who they are. This could just be a bad, crappy 6-10 season, and welcome to the rest of the NFL and what people in other cities have to live with time and again when you don't have the greatest quarterback who's ever played, as your quarterback, and paired with the greatest coach who can bail you out of almost any jam and turn even really crappy, mediocre teams into 11-5 division winners. That's not here right now. There may not be answers, and what you're going to hear very soon is burn it down. And as with the trade deadline approaching, this is going to be a big topic. If you don't think you have it, we're going to start talking about Gilmore and Tooney and who knows what, and play the kids and see what you have situation. And we might get there sooner rather than later. So I don't know what you think. I don't think it's there yet, but
it's not there yet. But I will say, they travel to Buffalo next weekend for a game against the Bills that if they don't win that game, they're out of the division race. Mathematically, it's obviously possible that they can come back in the division, but from a kind of a odds standpoint, if you will, or a projection standpoint, percentage wise, it's extremely low odds that the Patriots are going to come back and win the AFC East if they're 2-5 with a loss to Buffalo in hand. So at that point in time, that's sort of when you need to start thinking about kind of dumping pieces or moving on to Stidham to kind of see what he has for next year to get an evaluation of him. I think the most kind of frustrating thing for me is that you always think, we talked about this a little bit. We always think that Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels and that staff will figure out a way to make this team presentable. And I think what we're seeing right now is that they might not have the personnel to make this thing acceptable, make this thing passable, make it kind of look like a Patriots team. I just don't know if they have the personnel in the front seven defensively, and the overall offense it's not the worst in the NFL, but it's in the bottom tier. I don't know if they have the horses. I don't know if they have the players. And at the end of the day, even Bill Belichick will be the first one to admit this to you. At some point, it does become more about Jimmys and Joes than X's and O's, right? We can sit here and scheme up the best thing in the world, but if you don't have the players to go out there and execute it, it's not going to make a difference. It's sad to say, it's dark to say, but I think we are in a territory now where we need to start realizing and kind of coming to terms with the fact that this Patriots team just might not have the personnel to actually do what we are normally used to seeing here in New England.
And look, the I told you so brigade is going to say, well, duh. Because this is what it looked like entering the year. You lost quite a few impact players, both either in free agency or that's not even to mention Tom Brady, but just between players who signed elsewhere and the COVID situation, you lost a ton on that defense. So you were really looking just to the secondary to kind of keep things alive, but you knew there were issues there. You knew you were light on weapons, and you knew you were entering the season in uncharted waters with the quarterback situation. So there's a lot of people, and I don't want to, but I mean, a lot of people who were like, this could be really bad. You're just so used to it not being that way because you're so used to Bill and Josh, as you mentioned, just pulling the rabbit out of their hat, scheming it, outthinking people, and just making other teams play left-handed, playing to, this team's strengths and the other team's weaknesses. What's perplexing about this version of the Patriots is they don't seem to be playing to what strengths that they do have, or they're just not able to because they're just so outweighed by their deficiencies that they can't even get there. Today, for example, they couldn't get the running game going really, at any point in time. So they can't. They just can't establish whatever identity is that they're trying to establish.
Right, and I think that comes back to a little bit more about Cam, is that their identity, or their best identity, I think, is what we're seeing is, listen, I think their overall best identity is what we saw in week 1 against Miami.
Smash it.
Right, the bully ball, all that kind of stuff. But then I still feel like, that offense can only work in certain matchups and in certain situations. If you're not ahead in the game, then you can't run that style of offense because you need to throw your way back into the football game. So at some point in time, every single football game, for the most part, comes down to which team executes their drop back passing game better. Which team does it? Last year in the Super Bowl is a perfect example, right? The Niners, their drop back passing game is the Chiefs, and the Chiefs. That's ultimately what it usually comes down to in the NFL, is their pass offense versus their pass defense and vice versa. And right now the Patriots are very, very much behind the 8 ball on the pass offense side of things. Bill Belichick just say that Cam is still the starter, and he did kind of put his support behind Cam Newton in his presser. So it's not going to be Jarrett Stidham next week, at least based off of those comments. But I don't know. I think the best way to go about it is you have to go and you have to bring back that week 1 game plan and at least try that in the first quarter next week and see, can you be a Cam designed running offense, right? Where Cam might carry the ball 15 times a game. He might, be involved in 45 rushing plays. And that's just something that you're going to have to live with, that he's going to take those body blows if you want to be a competitor, if you want to be a winning team. I think there's a lot of other questions, too, of what do you do with the pieces? Stephon Gilmore, Joe Thuney. Do you sell everything at the deadline and go young and kind of, chalk this up to a rebuilding year? And I personally, I don't think Bill Belichick will ever do that. I really don't. Maybe if he gets a great deal for one of those guys, if he gets, let's say he gets a 1st round pick back for Gilmore, maybe he pulls the trigger on that one. But I really do think that they're going to continue to insist that the answers are in-house, that the answers are in that locker room, and that they can pull this thing around. And they're going to say, and they're going to lean back on their laurels and say, we've had losing records before. We've been in holes to begin the season before, even though it's never been this bad. And they're going to keep on saying that. I don't know. It's a head scratcher because you've seen it 4 games in a row now where consistently it's the quarterback that's really shooting them in the foot. The turnovers, the bad decisions, the poor timing. It's just not consistent enough.
A couple other pieces of post-game commentary. Stidham talking, did not acknowledge whether Belichick said to the team afterwards anything about Newton continuing to be the starter, even though he said it in his post-game. But he did say that he has been getting more reps with the starters during the week. So that is something to chew on a little bit. And he said each week he practices as if he's the guy. So, Stidham is sitting there, waiting and wanting for his chance. Devin McCourty also in post-game said, you never want to be embarrassed like this. Right now, we just got to worry about each of us going out there and fighting to keep our jobs. So at this point, it is about players going out there and playing better. And right now, there's just really crappy performances up and down the field. Evan, any final thoughts here before we move on? And again, this is going to be a really interesting week because of everything between the quarterback situation, the talk of potentially dealing players, heading into an absolute must-win game against Buffalo. But any final thoughts here?
No, I think that you just summed it up, is that at this point in time, and Devin McCourty really summed it up, it's about the players playing better than they've played. This isn't about scheme. This isn't about coaching. And obviously that some of it is about coaching when you want to get more out of your players, certainly. But this isn't about drawing things up on the whiteboard or reinventing the wheel schematically, offensively. Their guys need to execute their system better than they have, or this could be a 6-10, 5-11 type football team.
Okay, well, that's it. I got a couple people in the chats, Evan. I'm gonna give us a little bit of people are dying to know right now. What do you think they can get for Thuney and Gilmore before we? And anyone wants to throw in a question here, we'll answer a couple before we go.
Yeah, the Gilmore thing is really tough because he's a 30-year-old player that's expensive, that's probably on the downslope instead of the upslope, and those types of players usually don't net a ton in a trade. And if you're assuming that, at some point in time you're going to get a comp pick compensation back for him, which is a third rounder in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
I don't know if you're going to get better than a second round pick for Stephon Gilmore or Joe Thuney, who's only under contract for the rest of the season, and then you have to pay him also. So you have to look at the contract as well as the player, right? Like, if you think that you're going to get a good enough return, then that's one thing. But if you are a team that's looking to acquire Joe Thuney, you only have him under contract for 14 more games or 10 more games or whatever it is at this point, and then you have to pay him big money to keep him around. So if you're going to give up a first round pick, you're giving up a first round pick and a huge contract. And I just don't know if they're going to get what they want back for those two guys.
You might be looking at, again, in a situation with players like this, you might get a team to overpay who thinks they are a player away. Someone who lost someone on the offensive line that really needs somebody like Thuney in there to jumpstart it. Perhaps. So a team that right now is really having a difficult time locking down opposing receivers might say, you know what, I'm going to take that flyer. But, it has to be a perfect storm. And again, it's tough to figure out what they're going to get here. Let's see if we got anything else. Oh, some anti-Belichick. This is tough. These are tough comments here. Someone asked what you could get for Harry and Edelman. I'll tell you right now, nothing and less than nothing for those two guys right now.
You're not going to trade N'Keal Harry, guys. N'Keal Harry is here to stay, buster or boom. Boom or bust, I guess is the way to put that, right? Whether he sinks or swims, he's going to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, we're going to have a lot of this trade talk again throughout the week. Yeah. Evan's got a lot of post-game stuff to he's got to jump in on some interviews and do some writing. So you guys can always catch us over at our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass. We'll have a bunch of post-game videos up over there. Evan's write-up, 10 Things We Learned, will be up shortly on CLNS Media, so check that out as well. And we'll be doing this every week after every game, hopefully 2 better results than this. Huge one against the Bills next week. Evan Lazar at Gillette Stadium. He's got to run and go do his job, so we'll talk to Evan later.